Tariffs are the biggest story in the global economy right now. America wants to bring manufacturing home. It is a popular idea, but something is not working the way it was supposed to. Because despite the tariffs, despite the trade war, despite years of political pressure, the world is still deeply structurally dependent on China. And the reason is something almost nobody is talking about. The visible story is well known. Decades of globalization moved manufacturing to where labor was cheapest and most plentiful. China won that bet, spectacularly. Now, the world wants it back. Tariffs were supposed to make Chinese goods expensive enough that companies would start making things domestically instead. The logic is simple. The reality is far more complicated. Here is what does not add up. US tariffs on Chinese goods have reached levels not seen since the 1930s. And yet, American imports from China remain near record levels. Apple still manufactures the vast majority of its products in China. Every major technology company still depends on Chinese supply chains. Why? For 3 decades, the world made a bet. Manufacturing would move to where labor was cheapest and most available. China won that bet completely. By the 2010s, China was responsible for roughly 30% of global manufacturing output, more than any other country in recorded history. But what happened over those 30 years was not just factories moving. It was entire ecosystems being built. Supplier networks, technical expertise, specialist machinery, trained workforces, layer upon layer of interconnected capability, each piece dependent on the ones around it. That is the thing that tariffs cannot simply price away. The answer seems clear. If you want to stop depending on China, build factories somewhere else. And companies are trying. Apple has shifted some production to India and Vietnam. TSMC is building chip fabs in Arizona. Intel is expanding in Europe. Samsung is investing in Texas. These are real investments, billions of dollars, years of planning. So, why, despite all of this, does the fundamental dependency remain? Because the problem was never the factories. You can build a factory anywhere. What you cannot easily move is everything that makes the factory work. The suppliers, the expertise, the ecosystem. 30 years of accumulated industrial capability that exists nowhere else at the same scale. Think about what it takes to make a smartphone. Not just the final assembly, the glass, the rare earth minerals, the precision alloys, the camera components, the chips, each one sourced from suppliers who spent decades developing the expertise, the equipment, and the scale to produce at the quality required. Those suppliers exist in clusters, in Shenzhen, in the Pearl River Delta, because they grew up next to each other, learning from each other, competing with each other, improving together. You cannot move that to Ohio. You can build a factory in Ohio. What you cannot build in months or even years is the supplier relationships, the specialist workforce, and the accumulated expertise that has been compounding in southern China since the 1990s. Economists call this industrial clustering, and it is in many ways harder to replicate than physical infrastructure. You can pour concrete overnight. You cannot grow expertise overnight. Consider Apple. The company has more than enough capital to build any factory it wants, anywhere it wants. And it has made real progress. India now manufactures a meaningful share of iPhones, but Apple's supply chain in China involves hundreds of specialist component suppliers. Many of them exist nowhere else at the required scale and quality. The same pattern appears in rare earth elements, the materials inside every battery, motor, speaker, and screen. China processes roughly 90% of the world's rare earth supply, not because other countries lack the deposits, because China built the refining infrastructure over decades, and nobody else did. Building a competing capability takes 20 to 30 years, not 2 to 3. The shift is happening. Slowly. Vietnam has absorbed significant electronics manufacturing. India is growing as a smartphone assembly hub. Mexico is expanding as a nearshoring destination for US companies. But these are partial solutions. Vietnam relies on Chinese components for a significant share of what it makes. India's supply chain depth is years behind China's. The honest assessment is this: diversification is real and it is accelerating. But meaningful independence from Chinese manufacturing for any major economy is not achievable in the time frame of a political cycle. It is measured in decades. There is a pattern here that keeps appearing. The most consequential dependencies in the world are almost never the ones that make headlines. It is not the tariff, not the factory, not the trade deal. It is the 30 years of accumulated expertise, supplier relationships, and industrial capability that nobody counted until it became impossible to replace. That is what makes a dependency real, not just needing something, being unable to imagine functioning without it. Tariffs can change prices. They can change trade routes. They can shift political conversations. What they cannot change quickly is where the world's manufacturing expertise actually lives. And right now, a significant share of it lives in China. Not because of ideology, not because of politics, but because of 30 years of compounding investment, expertise, and industrial capability that cannot be replicated overnight. That is a very different kind of power. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe. There's more where that came from.